This tutorial provides an introduction to the idea of sampling. One of the key things that you need to understand about sampling is the relationship between a population and a sample. So let's start just with the definition of both of those two terms. Your population, or your population of interest, is the collection of all individuals or items under consideration in a statistical study. Your key term here is all. Okay, your population is everybody. So if you're interested in learning about how much the typical person in an office building spends on lunch, your population there would be all workers in this certain office building. Okay, so we want to consider everybody that we're interested in. So that's what it's going to be your population. Okay, a sample is a subset of the population from which data is obtained. Okay, the key term here is subset. So your sample is always going to be smaller than your population. If a population is reasonably small, or if considerable time and resources are available, a census can be conducted. Okay, so to define a census here is a collection of data taken from an entire population. So if we go back to the example of the office building and figuring out how much a typical person spends on lunch, if we wanted to answer that question using a census, we would need to go and survey every single person in the office building. Okay, if it's a small office building with only maybe 10 employees, okay, it would be reasonable to do a census. Okay, if your office building has 1,000 people in it, then a census is going to be very impractical. Since most of the time it will be impractical to do a census, a sample must be used. And then the process of taking a sample is called sampling. When sampling, it's very important that a representative sample is used. So we want our sample to represent our broader population. So a representative sample is a sample that has relevant characteristics to the population. Okay, so again, going back to the office building example, it's going to be important that, so if we have that giant office building that has 1,000 employees, it's going to be important that when we take our sample, say we only want to sample 30 people instead of 1,000, it's going to be important that those 30 people are a good representation of the population so that their characteristics mimic the greater population. Okay, so let's take a look at an example just by taking a look at this article, and if we can determine what population we're interested in studying and then what is that sample. So if we go through the article, it says exposure to smoking in movies appears to be linked with teens' risks of becoming established smokers, a U.S. study found. Dr. James D. Sargent of the Dartmouth Medical School in Lebanon, New Hampshire, and colleagues surveyed 6,522 U.S. adolescents aged 10 to 14 about their smoking and movie watching habits in 2003. The researchers coded displays of smoking in 532 hit movies in 5 years prior to the survey, then asked teens if they had seen a random selection of 50 of these movies. Follow-up interviews to assess smoking status were done after 8 months, 16 months, and 2 years. And we'll just stop for now. The rest of it you can read on your own at your leisure if you'd like. But let's just take a look at what do we think the population is? Who are we interested in studying? Okay, so again, population is going to be the broader group of people that we're interested in. And what I would guess is their population is going to be pretty general. Their population here is probably just teens. Okay, we'd maybe want to define our population maybe as US teens, but really they're looking for what are teens' views towards smoking. Now the sample, they certainly didn't do a census here. There's no way that they could measure all teens. So what they did is they took this sample. So their sample, now we need to be pretty specific about this sample. The sample was the 6,522 US adolescents aged 10 to 14. And then I would say that the 2003 is also important, so the 2003. So in this case I would say teens is our population, and this is certainly our sample. Alright, and their sampling procedure, they didn't really go into how they came up with their sample, but in future tutorials we are going to look at how are samples like that taken, and how are they then used to help us gain more information about the population. So this idea of a population versus sample is important to the sampling process, and we'll continue looking at that in future tutorials. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.